Hello, thanks for listening to the Multiply podcast. I'm Carson Samson from Mennonite Brethren Church of Manitoba, and with me today is Karla Braun from the Herald.
Hello, I'm here.
We had new intro music today. That's Come Morning from Bread We Break. Bread We Break, of course, is the band that Sarah Fraser, our usual co-host, sings with. And if you remember, if you're a longtime listener, Cullen Clausen he plays bass in that band. And so they've just generously offered up their music for us to use. And I think I'm going to play the entire piece at the end of the show. And we'll get to hear a lot more from them. If you're wanting to listen to that, they're on iTunes, and the album is Come Morning EP. And I'd encourage you to listen to it. So this morning, it's getting the kids ready and thinking about what I have ahead in the next couple of weeks and looking through their calendars, and notice that before you know it, we're going to be involved in some Christmas festivities. And I've also noticed, of course, Halloween just being a couple of days ago, that some of the stores have already begun to decorate. And this is an ongoing thing. There's nothing new. But I just wondered what you thought about Christmas come early. What do you think?
Well, I have two thoughts that are completely at odds with each other. One is that we live in the northern climate. It gets dark and it gets cold. So bring on the Christmas decorations. It gives us hope as the sun goes away. It's so wonderful to have that cheerfulness. And by the time you reach December 23rd, when the darkest day comes, Christmas is in full force, and once it's over, once Christmas is over, the sun is already coming back. So on the one hand, bring on the Christmas decorations. Yeah, right. On the other hand, as Christians, I was fascinated while I was in university. I had this professor, an English professor specializing in medieval English, who was from Poland. He was an amazing guy. And he had grown up Catholic, and he made just an offhand comment one time that has stuck with me ever since, that in the Catholic tradition, the season of Advent is not supposed to be celebration. And we realize that when we look at some of the Lenten passages, that this time of preparation, preparing for the birth of Christ, is a time of lament and of longing for salvation to come, and perhaps not having experienced it come yet. And so he said he was shocked at Christmas parties at his Catholic college at University of Toronto. And so that has always been in my head, that, wow, the season of Advent as Christians is perhaps very different than what our culture celebrates as Christmas, even as our culture is trying to back away from the use of Christmas because it is quite lodged in Christian tradition. It's really not.
Well, the big question is your tree up yet? No?
Oh, does my tree ever get up? I'm not big on decorating my own space, but I do enjoy the decorations that crop up everywhere else.
You should ask my wife how I feel about Christmas decorating, because I love the way that they look, and I'm happy to have them up, but I'll have zero involvement in the placement and decorating process. It's really a frustrating exercise for her. And I'm just unwilling to budge. I need to have a change of heart in that department, probably. In our house, we have a pretty exciting Christmas coming up, and it's really completely top secret, because there's that, minuscule chance my children may actually listen to the program. It's very minuscule, but I'm not taking the chance. And we've got some stuff in store for them this year that's sort of could throw them for it's a big surprise. It's a big surprise. So
with the decorations, do you leave them be if you're not involved in the execution?
Right. Do I have any say?
Do you just give appreciation for their existence, or is there some like, oh, you should have done?
That would be dangerous. Yeah. No, I think I know my place in all of this, and it's on the couch, and or it's in front of the TV, but it's also a role I play in silence. I'm not to criticize or critique what happens. Otherwise,
just appreciation and affirmation.
Right.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's good for my marriage and my life in general, just to be able to continue breathing. So how about at your household and in your extended family? What does Christmas look like?
We all head on over to my mom and dad's on Christmas Eve, assuming we're all around, which isn't always the case, and have a big spread of food and hang out, and Dad reads the Christmas story from Luke 2. I say hesitantly going, oh, dear, is that the chapter? I'm pretty sure that's the chapter. I'm supposed to know this. Yeah. And then jumps over to Matthew and reads the part about the Magi. Okay. Always read from the New Revised, I think. There's a particular, he does not read it from NIV. He's got a particular translation. And so, you hear these things in a certain way. And with my extended family, with my mom's side of the family, one of her brothers-in-law, my uncle, is a pastor. He's retired now. But he always recites the entire passage of Luke 2 from memory in the King James. So that's always a treat at that family gathering to hear Uncle Dave go through the Christmas story right out of his head.
Sweet. How weird is it that we are actually even talking about Christmas in November, the 2nd, 3rd today? It's just wrong. So let's.
Well, as someone who works in for a publication, we're always working way ahead. So I am entirely accustomed to being completely done with Christmas by the time it starts for other people, because I've already put a magazine to press.
Fair enough. I can appreciate that. But the listeners probably just skipped over the last 5 minutes. Let's talk about our guest today. We're going to talk with, we're going to hear from Dave Ens, who's from 188 Princess. And we're excited to find out what happens there. I, for one, have only been there the one time. I was totally enamored, fell in love with the building and the facility. If you haven't gone upstairs in 188, then do make sure you go out of your way to visit and find out what's happening there, which, of course, we'll learn a whole lot more in the next couple of minutes. But and
on Thursday nights is when they have their regular worship gathering. So that's a time you could kill two birds with one stone. You can see their beautiful space and find out who the people are there, have a taste of what's going on there.
That definitely would encourage anybody who has the time on Thursday to go check that out. So let's get right into our interview. So we're sitting down with Dave Ens from 188. Thanks so much for joining us today, Dave.
Thank you.
I thought we would just start at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got from here to there or there to here?
Sure. I grew up in Winnipeg, was born into the North Kelowna Mennonite Brethren Church, which eventually planted McIver Avenue. And so our family went there, and I grew up at McIver and was well nurtured and cared for and discipled there. And out of that church life, that community life there, was given opportunity and called into pastoral ministry. That's jumping a whole bunch of years. So I was youth pastor at McIver for about 5 years. Did some seminary study, and then was called to Brandon, Manitoba, where I pastored for just about 9 years at the MB Church there, which was really good. And then stepped out of that and into Eastview about 7 years ago. I think I've been at Eastview 7 years now. And so I've been in vocational ministry, pastoral ministry for what feels like a very long time. But yeah, close to around 20 years, give or take. And love it. It's a very rewarding thing. I'm a dad. I have 3 kids. I'm a husband, and those things are also very, very good parts of my life.
So how did you, or when did you know that you had a calling to ministry?
My calling came through my came through the life of the community I was part of. And so I was given opportunity within McIver. I had leaders at McIver who saw something in me and opened the door for me. I preached my first sermon or gave my first devotional or whatever you want to call it in grade 11 or 12 or something like that. And so was given that opportunity, went to MBCM, which is now part of CMU, and their professors and other people that I respect very much kept saying, this is something you should be doing. They weren't coy about it. It was this is what you should be doing. And then of course, every great calling story has a grandmother in it. And my grandmother, who was very blunt, made it no uncertain terms that's what I should be doing. And so you have to listen to your grandmother. And so I did, and don't regret that one bit. Yeah. So my calling has always come out of the community, which I value very, very highly. I value those voices in my life very much.
Well, let's shift it to where you are now. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually going to go back a few years to 2012 when I spoke to you about the new campus or the new building at 188 Princess, not the Princess campus, but right. 188. And you toured me through the building, you and Greg, for a couple of hours and told me about the visions you had for what was going to go on there. It was pretty exciting. If people are interested, there's a story in the Herald called Suburban Church Opens Downtown Campus if they want to go back into the past and find out what was said there. So I heard you saying at that point, this is not a church plant. It's not a satellite. It's about a vision of becoming one church in many locations. And I believe it was Greg who said he wants to bring Mary's attitude into Martha's kitchen.
Right. Yeah.
And now 188 is described as a deliberate conversational or transformational community that seeks to deal with the and then what. So tell us, what does this all mean? What's going on at 188?
Yeah, 188 is birthed out of Eastview Community Church, and the way it came about. There's two sides to that and then what statement, right? On one hand, being in church ministry for a long time and sitting watching people in the pews and getting to speak or preach on Sundays and interacting with people, those sorts of things, you find this group of people who love Jesus, who love what the church is, who love coming on Sundays and worshiping and hearing and being in the scriptures and that sort of thing. But there's this kind of sense of, okay, so I'm following Jesus, but so now what? Like, what do I do? What do I do now? I come to church and I love Sundays and it's good and I feel challenged, but now what? What do I do now? And so that's one side of it. The other side of it was that within Eastview, we were working with a particular demographic, and I don't think it's limited just to this one, but this is our situation, working with people coming out of the correction system, working with people coming out of addictions programs, trying to get back on their feet. And within the course of that process, they've discovered Jesus, and the hope that the gospel offers them is what they've been looking for. And so they've given their life to Christ and are seeking to follow him. But then they step out of their program. And we always talk about these programs, and even prison to some extent creates this false prosperity, because there's so much they don't have to worry about. They don't have to worry about where their food's coming from. They don't have to worry about where they're going to stay. They don't have to worry about what they're going to do, all those kinds of things. So they get out of those communities and they've given their life to Jesus, and they step out on the street. Well, and then what? And now what? Where do they go now? Because largely the churches that do a lot of good work inside the prisons or inside the programs aren't there to pick up the people when they step out of them. And that's, that's not a critique. It's just, it's a reality. And so we put those two things together and we thought, we have people who are looking to say, what does it really mean for my life, for me within my life to follow Jesus with integrity every day? We call it, this is the language of discipleship, right? What does it mean to me to follow well every day? And so 188 was birthed out of that desire. And that's why when we were looking where do we do this, how do we make it happen, downtown was very deliberate because we wanted a place that had proximity to where a lot of our friends spend their time, to where they live, to where they're familiar with. And so that idea of being close to them was a big deal. And so that's why we say 188 seeks to answer the and then what. So you've given your life to Jesus. Well, now what? So I'm following him full out. I'm surrendered. Well, now what? What do you do now? And so that's what we're seeking to answer, to help each other answer together.
So one thing about 188 is, in a more typical church environment, the doors are open to the community and to the public, probably on a more limited scale.
Right.
Your doors are open every day, all the time. You have your community interacting. They're there, working, volunteering, doing different things. So could you maybe start with a day in the life of someone from the community who spends a great deal of their time at 188?
Yeah, sure. Our byline is 188. We're creating space for people to meet Jesus, and that idea of creating space is very important to us because I believe very strongly that I don't transform someone's life. The Spirit of God pointing them to Christ transforms someone's life. So I want to create space for them to encounter that Jesus. So we do that in a number of ways. A typical day, our drop-in, our informal gathering time we're open from 10 to 4, Monday to Friday. At 10 o'clock, the doors will open. Before that, our friend Rob, who cleans and sets things up and gets everything ready, he's usually there by about 7, and he gets the place ready, gets the coffee brewing, that kind of thing. He gets it all ready. The doors open at 10, and already by then, people are already starting to gather. You have people who, on one hand, maybe are homeless, and so they're either staying at Siloam or at other places, or maybe they're not anywhere. They're outside, and so they're up early. And especially as the weather gets colder, they're looking for places. And so usually by 10, the doors open. People are already coming in. Coffee's on. There's computers to use. We have Wi-Fi and that kind of thing. Phone calls that need to be made. And often, people come in and plunk down on a couch and will fall asleep because they just haven't been able to sleep. So there's that informal part of it, and that's we keep that, or I should say, we make sure that we're engaged in that context. It's not just come and use it, whatever will be upstairs or around. We are in conversation with people where, are there needs that we can help meet, that kind of thing. And then throughout those times, we have more formal scheduled times. So on Tuesdays, for example, from 11:30 to 1, we call it our community and conversation. It's basically a Bible study, for lack of a better word. We have someone brings a lunch, and we have people from Eastview who have coordinated that. They make sure lunch is there every Tuesday, and then we spend time asking how life is going. What have people learned? What are things we're struggling with? What can we pray for each other? And then we take a passage. We're going through Philippians right now, for example, and we'll just say, so let's read it together. And what do we hear? And it's so beautiful to watch people from different places in life, all over the map, socioeconomically, ethnically, everything, engage in the same piece of scripture and see it differently, but yet, respect each other in what they bring when they say, I hear this passage and I hear this, and someone else says, well, that's funny, but I hear this. And to me, it's a very beautiful exercise of working through Scripture together as a community. So we have those formal things placed throughout our informal day. So Tuesday we have a Bible study. Monday, Greg, my colleague, has just started a group called Praxis, and it's about getting past just simply dealing with our addictions and working at what is it that has brought us to this place where we live out our lives with our addiction, our in addiction so often. So that's been a great group of just coming together and sharing each other's life stories and journeys and being there for each other. Thursday night, we gather and we worship and we pray for each other and read scripture together, and there's usually a bit of a teaching time in that as well. And then Friday, there's a lunch and a movie that is and that's more casual, but there's lunches brought, and it's everyone can let's not use the computers. Let's sit together and watch this. So we have these informal times where we create space, and then within that we've placed these more formal programs, if that's what we want to call them, in there. Yeah.
So I think back to your history, youth pastor, pastoring in Brandon, and I think about a day in the life, and I wonder how your day in the life must compare to, that your previous ministry appointments, and just maybe would you speak a little bit about that transition and what it looks like now for you to be pastoring in this community versus or compared to what you used to do? Yeah,
that's a really good question. One of the things I had to learn is I had to redefine what makes a day successful. How do I define I got work done today? Because typically we say, I got reports made, I answered emails, I got my sermon prepped, or I got something prepped, that I got work done today. And usually we probably wouldn't say it, but if we're honest, we would say, if I have appointments or I have someone coming in, they're kind of interruptions, and they're not bad. It's just that they're interrupting my day. Did you get work done today? Oh, I couldn't get any work done today because I was meeting with people all day, right? And so I had to redefine what it means to get work done. And so particularly within the drop-in setting, you sit there, and I sit there often with our computers, and we try to multitask, which is a bit of a myth, right? So we're pretending we're multitasking, trying to get some things done, but at the end of the day, it's the beauty of engaging in that kind of real life experience with people is quite is an honor, is a privilege, and it really is quite beautiful to hear people's stories, to suffer with them, to rejoice with them, to challenge them in how they're behaving and acting and living. It's there's something very sacred about it. It does create problems because there's still work to be done in terms of the typical office kind of work. So that usually gets pushed to my evenings at home or late at night, but that's why God made coffee, I guess. So it really has redefined that and challenged me to think about, what does it mean? What does gospel transformation, what does the transforming work of the gospel look like in someone like this, as opposed to a fairly typical, middle class kind of circumstance?
Well, it's obvious you're very busy there, but you don't do this alone, correct? You mentioned just a few moments ago a gentleman by the name of Rob who does quite a bit of work there. Yeah. And then Greg. Could you maybe talk a little bit about the team at 188? Yeah, Greg,
the 188 was birthed out of this dream that Greg and I had together. Greg has been working at Eastview. If I've been there 7 years, I guess Greg's maybe been there 13, 14 years.
This is Greg Armstrong.
Greg Armstrong, thank you, yeah. Greg was the outreach pastor, or is the outreach pastor at Eastview, and he was trained. His training is in chaplaincy, and so he spent time in doing work in the Selkirk Mental Health. He spent time as a chaplain a little while in the Remand Center in downtown Winnipeg, and so he's really opened those doors for Eastview to get into those places. And so Greg brings that. We always laugh at what's the difference between a pastor and a chaplain. We argue what that actually is, but I think there is a difference, and I think it's a very good complement to each other to have each other as colleagues. He brings that chaplain's heart to the community, and so working with Greg is a wonderful thing. Rob is a friend. He kind of came into 188. He lived on the street for many years. We just recorded Rob's story. It's quite a story, and Rob is Rob finds himself redeemed by work, and so you'd almost think he's Mennonite, but he finds some value in being able to contribute to a place that he respects by working in it. And so Rob works. Rob gets there first, and he opens up and he gets things clean, and he takes it very seriously. He does it very well. He's not homeless anymore. He has a place, and so that's been great. And Rob's story is really neat. I won't get into it here. There's places you can go to see it, but that idea of seeking to find some sense of peace in life, and he's found it within a faith-based community, even though he still kind of wonders what faith is about. And so Rob works there, and we have other volunteers as well. Chris Shankruk is another guy that spends time there. He interned with us in the summer. We have a lead team, a sort of board that of people who are investing themselves or taking ownership of the vision of 188, and some of them are very hands-on. So there's a neat team of people who are putting a lot of energy into the place.
Let's get into your story matters thing in a moment. But first, another question about the team. As part of Eastview, I'm hearing you talk about the people that you're working with, that you've connected through Greg's connection with the Remand Center and things like that. How does Eastview as a congregation get involved with 188, or what's the relationship of some of the members from there being involved? Harking back to 2012, which I realize you were just starting out, what one's vision is and what one actually does aren't always the same. You spoke about 60 members from Eastview committed to rub shoulders with Armstrong's friends. Yeah. I'm quoting from my story here. What has that looked like as the years have passed and you've developed a rhythm?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we've deliberately chosen to stay, and this is part of the language of what you call 188, right? That's part of not really the trouble, but part of the deliberateness that we've tried to use with language. We've chosen to stay connected to something larger than ourselves, because I think that's very significant. Otherwise, we can get lost in our own, we become very myopic then, right? So we stay connected to Eastview. I still preach at Eastview. I'm still engaged with the congregation there. And vice versa, Eastview finds itself engaged in 188. Now it's not the whole congregation, but there are people like our lead team, for example, is right now made up of people from Eastview, people who have said we want to see this flourish, we want to see this succeed, and the question of how do you keep something within the inner city going like this? How do you keep sustaining it? That's what they're charged with, and so that's what they're looking at. We have care groups that get involved, that come and participate. We had, when we first started, we had that group of 60. And like you said, when you cast a vision, it's everybody has this picture of how it will live itself out, and so that group of 60 quickly became 30, and that quickly became 20, but I would say that has turned itself around as 188 continues to take shape, and people understand this is what it's about, and so that relationship with Eastview is a very healthy thing, I think, for both sides of it, and so we have people kind of flowing back and forth between the two places. And for some people, it's a very natural outflow of Eastview. Like when you would say, are you, if you ask them, are you part of Eastview? You part of 188? They wouldn't understand that question. They'd say, well, what do you mean? Like that's one thing. We're doing this together. So in that way, we still look to Eastview for that sense of ownership. Now, of course, it's grown beyond that as we network with other organizations and even other churches that get involved. And I think there's lots of room for other churches, other organizations as well to be involved. But that piece of how do we sustain this, and how do we, how does this ministry carry on, and what does it look like down the road? Eastview is very much taking ownership of that, which I appreciate. I think it needs to be lodged in the community, not with one person or two people. Right.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment, but I wanted to share with you a few events that are upcoming in our area and our province. First off, C2C Network has been hosting a series of dessert celebrations, and they have a few more yet in the month of November 2016. On November the 6th, they'll be at Elm Creek MB Church, which is, of course, in Elm Creek, Manitoba. November the 11th, that's a Friday night, they'll be at NKMB, or North Kildonan Mennonite Brethren Church. And on Sunday, November the 13th, they're in Winkler, Manitoba, at Winkler MB Church. Those all start at 6 p.m. It's a great opportunity to find out what's happening in new church plants across our province. And so if you're interested in attending, I'd encourage you to visit c2cnetwork.ca, where you'll learn more. MBCM is hosting their CR, which is a Council of Representatives, so CR 2016. Focuses on discipleship through education. That's held on November the 26th, all day on Saturday starting at 9 a.m. at 83 Henderson Highway. And you'll get a chance to hear from our affiliated schools and provide input. You can email events@mbcm.ca, and that email will go right to me if you're interested in registering. All I really need from you is the names of the people who are interested in attending and a phone number, and we'll look after the rest. Further into the next year, in January, MB Mission Central Canada is hosting coach training on January the 19th. That'll be held at CMU, Canadian Mennonite University. And if you search MB Mission Central Canada on Facebook, you'll find their Facebook page, and they have an official event set up for that where you can register. And that's it. Let's get back to Dave.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Your Story Matters. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Rob's, and is he the second feature? And what is the who else is featured? And what's the purpose behind that video series?
Yeah. I'll tell you where that came to be. I was at Donald Miller's Storyline convention in Chicago about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, and the whole thing was about telling your story. To dare to dream about something that you'd like to do, and what a great story looks like, and how do you tell a great story? How do you, what are the components necessary for a great story? That kind of thing. And at the same time, so I was there. Greg was back at 188, and he texted me, and he said, one of our friends was tragically. Has tragically died, and it was very tragic. It was a domestic dispute, and it just went very bad, and he was killed. And I thought, if there's no one, like, this guy could this event could happen, and this thing it would transpire, and nobody would know that it happened, and to the vast majority of people it wouldn't matter. Like this event, which to us was very tragic and very sad, largely went it wasn't a blip on anybody's radar. And this guy lived his life, and he had very severe issues he had to deal with, and mental illness being one of them. And the fact that he was gone impacted nobody. And yet we think, but he does matter. I mean, he matters because he's created by God. He's made in the image of God. He's loved by God. And so something tells me that he has to matter. And so it was those two things coming together, talking about story. I thought, man, there's so many people whose stories will never get heard because they're never in the right place, or they don't have anybody who really cares for them, or they're seen as being less than worthwhile. They're not really highly valued, right? And I think, no, we need to tell these people's stories because they matter to God, so they should matter to us. And that's where this idea of Your Story Matters started coming from. And so we started recording people's stories as a way of honoring the fact that they're made in the image of God and loved by God, that they matter to God. But also as a way of acknowledging that we need to know each other well in community, and that because stories are life-changing, right? Stories are challenging. Stories are they push us. When you hear a story that inspires you, like, man, I want to be a better person because I just heard that story or watched that movie or something like that. And so we want to use that as a way of spurring each other on as well. So that's where it came out of. And so we've been recording the stories of people who are part of our 188 community. We have formally we have 2 of them. We have 2 more that are in the works, and we're kind of just going to keep recording them as we go.
So far, it's Rob and it's Kristen, right?
Correct.
And folks could watch these videos on your website, 188.org.
Yes.
And
ONE88.org.
ONE, that's right.
Yeah.
ONE88.org. And where else could folks?
They're on. I use Vimeo to host them, and so if you, I think actually it's under my name. So if you search Dave Ens with one N, ENS, you'll find them on Vimeo. Yeah. Yeah, and so we've recorded Kristen's story and Rob's story. We had an hour and a bit of footage and trying to get it down. I think I've got it down to 20 minutes, and I want to get it down to a little bit less than that now. But so it's been a beautiful thing. The other neat thing that's happened is that we have a friend of 188, Terry Lynn Friesen, who's an actor. She's directed and produced and that kind of thing. What she has done is she started to, on Fridays, the last Friday of every month, she's hosting a How to Tell Your Story workshop. And so she's an actor, right? So she's a professional storyteller. So she's whoever wants, they go and meet upstairs, and she walks through, how do you tell your story live? I've been recording on video, but how do you tell your story live? What are the components? How do you do it well? That kind of thing, with the hope being that we'd have a storytelling evening down the road, just to give people a chance to say, here's and not necessarily a testimony as we would understand it, but just here's part of my story. Here's something funny that happened. Here's a significant event in my life, that kind of thing. So I'm excited about that.
You mentioned upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
Upstairs at Eastview is a large gathering room. That's where you have your Thursday
at
night
188, yeah.
gatherings.
Yeah.
Sorry, at 188.
Yeah.
Said the wrong thing. There's also a kitchen there.
Yes.
And there's stuff going on in that kitchen.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, the kitchen, yeah. The kitchen is kind of, I call it a bit of our white elephant. We were looking for this building, and so this building came, and the room upstairs at 188, it's just a beautiful room. Everything about it speaks well to gathering and having conversation. It just has a sense that you want to be there and sit and sip a coffee and talk. And then there's a kitchen. It used to be a restaurant, so there's a commercial kitchen attached to it. And when we got there, we thought, oh man, the possibilities are endless with this kitchen. And then we started, we brought some people in, and we started figuring out all the things that need to be done to this kitchen to bring it to the point of where we can use it in a commercial fashion. And that's why I call it a bit of our white elephant. It's kind of like, this is an incredible gift. And then you think, oh man, I don't know how much of a gift this is, because there's a lot that needs to be done. Apparently, the health inspector says anyways, there's a lot that needs to be done for it to be functional in a commercial sort of way. We use it with our, we can do our own things and within our own programs, but to use it in a commercial way, there's lots of work that needs to be done. So we've tried a number of things with it. We've had a cooking school that used it. We had a bit of a relationship with them that lasted about a year. We've at times used it as kind of a life skills sort of training ground. Come and learn how to cook a meal, and that's in cooperation with various programs. We've done that. So it's still a little bit of we're not 100% sure what to do with this space, and partially it's because to get it up and running, there's a pretty significant investment that needs to be made to do that. So it opens the door for lots of opportunity. We've had weddings there. We've done a dinner theater out of there and used the kitchen for that. Just this question of how do we fully utilize that? That's still something we're dreaming about.
I was on your Facebook page yesterday, and I also saw that you formed a new partnership with Mental Health First Aid Canada. Could you speak a little bit about what you are planning to do together?
Yeah, being within the proximity we're in, downtown Winnipeg, mental health is something that we deal with. Mental illness is something we deal with on a daily basis. And the Canadian Mental Health Association offers what they call a mental health first aid course, and something I would highly recommend for any church, because I think it's not just it's very acute downtown, but I think generally dealing with there's mental illness we need to deal with in our churches. So what Canadian Mental Health does is they come in and they walk you through it depends how you do it. You can do it, 2 really long days, 4 shorter days, whatever. They walk you through basically a first aid of mental health. So if you see this happening, this is probably what's going on and this is how to respond to it. Just as you were, a St. John's kind of thing. If the person's choking, here's how to respond. If you see a person acting this way, with these kinds of mental health symptoms, then this is an appropriate response to that. And so it's about educating ourselves as leaders and educating our volunteers, and Eastview as well, because the staff at Eastview will be part of that too, in saying, so these are appropriate responses to these mental health situations that you find yourself in. So I'm really excited for it. We're trying to just arrange for it to happen and get a date nailed down, but I'm excited for that to take place because it is a very real thing for us downtown.
And so when you're ready, when you've got the date set, folks can find out a little bit more about it by going where? To the Facebook page? Yeah, it will be on our Facebook page, and you can look for ONE88 on Facebook or to our website, 188.org, and we'll have dates and stuff listed there. It sounds like you've got some really great community partners, some support partners and organizations come alongside and help you to do so very many things there. And I'm also wondering how maybe our listeners could support or help or assist in one way or another.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think there's lots of room for that. And I mean, one of the things, there's a number of ways. There's a number of ways that people can get involved. I think 188 offers a very unique ministry experience, and I know there's people who have a heart for the marginalized people. Right, the phrase I use is the stranger, the widow, and the orphan. It's now, of course, we're not talking about widows and orphans necessarily, but within the biblical reference refers to those who are separated from lines of power, those who really have no one else to pick them up when they fall, who are impoverished when it comes to community and resources and all those sorts of things. I think 188 offers a really unique opportunity for those who have a heart for that. And so, I mean, one way to get involved is simply to be present and come and to volunteer, and you can talk with me about what that might look like. I'd love to talk with people more about that. Then there's also always practical things, right? I mean, whenever you're forming community, and I don't think it's just a Mennonite thing, but I think food is always a big part of forming community. And so we're always looking for people to provide food. Tuesday we provide a lunch, Friday we provide a lunch. We don't provide a lunch every day, and that's delivered because Siloam and UGM and those places are just down the road, and they do a great job. If you'd like to help out with lunches, we'd love that. If you had some extra baking lying around that you didn't know what to do with, we would gladly take it. Those sorts of things, like it's such a big part of forming community well together that's we take it very seriously. Actually, our to have food as part of that. So those are two very, very practical ways.
And the best way for listeners to reach you would be?
You can reach me at dave@eastview.org is my email address. Our phone number is 204-504-8118. And you can talk with myself or talk with Greg. The other piece that, in terms of involvement, we've had an intern during the summer for the last 2 years. And if there's someone who hears this and says, "Man, I'd love to get involved there and explore what an internship might look like," I'd love to talk with them about that as well. Email, phone number. Those are two great ways to get a hold of me.
So right now we're sitting down in early November, so this might throw you for a loop a little bit. But my mind already starts to move towards Christmas. And Karla and I have talking about this a little bit, but I would like to know what Christmas looks like at 188.
Yeah. Christmas this year will look different because it's Christmas Day is Sunday, right? Which happens, I guess, once every 7 years, give or take. And so we typically haven't had a Sunday service there. Now, as the community has progressed and grown, we're actually looking to launch a Sunday service once a month starting in January. And we might jump into Christmas, have Christmas Day be an earlier part. Christmas at 188, winter creates a lot of problems for people who are transient and people who are homeless. And so as the weather gets colder, we're thinking of ways, how do we remain open longer? How do we help meet some of those needs better? So, we giving gifts is very much a part of Christmas. Is there a way that we can help people with clothing, with warm mitts and toques and boots and socks and jackets and that kind of thing? We'd love to be able to have the gifts to give people. And then part of 188 has been also, or part of Eastview, I should say, and this is carried over into 188, has been connections with the Winnipeg, or the Christmas Cheer Board, with the hamper program. And again, we have a unique relationship with them, so they allow us to bring some of our friends from 188 to get them onto the list and make sure they get hampers. And I mean, we fill them. People from Eastview and other churches fill them. So that's it's been a way of just trying to find a way to connect people with with that prosperity that is so much a part of Christmas, right? And we can focus that prosperity so much on ourselves, and we're trying to help ourselves, help the churches, help each other. Say, how can we focus that on places where we meet, I'm going to say, real needs, that lack of for fear of being whatever on that. How can we point our prosperity in such a way that we're meeting, the real needs of these people downtown? That typically has been some of the work we've been doing at Christmas, and people respond very generously, and that's been a good thing.
I just want to say thanks for coming. Really appreciate your time talking to us, and I want to invite you back anytime you feel like chatting. I'd like to learn more about what's going on down the road. Come on in, give us a call. And I want to encourage you, Greg, Rob, your team, God's blessings as you try to navigate through the and then what. And, so thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's been great. Appreciate it.
So that was great to learn from Dave about what 188 is doing on Princess Street, downtown Winnipeg, working with a really neat community of people who are often find themselves at the margins and sometimes even find themselves without a home to live in. And so, as often happens when we turned off the mics when our interview finished, we had a little interview after the interview and started talking about Out of the Cold. This is a program that operates in a lot of other cities in Canada where churches open their doors, prearranged, of course. This is all, there's schedules, there's probably forms that somebody has signed, they've worked this out. They open their doors when the temperature gets below a certain degree for people who have no place to stay to come literally be out of the cold. And it baffles me that in Winnipeg, the coldest major city of its size in Canada, doesn't have a program like this. So we asked Dave a little bit about that. His friends from church, some of them are the ones who are staying outside in these cold temperatures. So we got a little bit passionate about this issue and what could be done, what kind of opportunities there are, what the needs are. So Carson had the great idea we could investigate this further in an upcoming podcast, talk to some people, get some of the facts about the matter. And
for sure. Yeah, I mean, everything's kind of up in the air at this point because we're still a little bit, high on the idea, and we don't know the logistics yet. But definitely thinking that maybe come January, we would take the show on the road and speak to a number of people who may be involved in this program or the development of one, and just have a lot more information. Because right now we don't have the information, and we just want to be able to get that out to people. So we'll do things a little differently the next time around, and we'll see what we can't find out. So, and that's pretty much it for today. I just want to thank you, listeners, for listening. And if you want to learn more about 188 Princess, their website again was one88.org, and you can find them on Facebook. And Dave also provided email and phone number, so I encourage you to be in touch. The podcast today was brought to you by a partnership between MBCM, Mennonite Brethren Church, Manitoba, and MB Mission, and also in partnership with the MB Herald. Speaking of the Herald, why don't you give us a sneak peek on what's happening in the next or an upcoming issue of the Herald. Can you do that for us?
Sure. Well, I'm going to assume that people are already reading their November, December issues, which will arrive in their mailboxes shortly. So I'm not even going to talk about what they'll find there because they've already found it. But we're actually going to do something that harks back to one of the podcasts that Carson did in spring, talking to Anna Marie Geddert from Jubilee and several other pastors from North Kildonan about neighboring, how to be a neighbor, the art of neighboring. So we're working on some of the podcast materials and talking with some of the pastors involved and just getting a little bit more information about that and presenting that to our readers in the written form after having encountered it in the audible oral form.
Right.
And January is always Week of Prayer from the Canadian Conference. Well, always. For the past 3 years, it's been Week of Prayer. So we're continuing that. So I encourage churches to plan for that, spend a week going through the resource of devotional materials that we're going to provide, and use your creativity, whether you're going to use this personally in your devotions, whether this will happen in small groups or corporately as the church gathering together to pray. Maybe at the beginning in the end, maybe one special night a week, maybe you can actually pull off gathering as a church every night for a whole week to pray. But we want to encourage people to come before our Father in heaven and bring our concerns personally and our cares for our neighborhood, our country, and the world, and asking God to open our eyes and move us to be his hands and feet where we are.
Because we're such an encouraging bunch, I'll continue to encourage. I want you to keep reading the pages of the Herald, keep listening to our program, and I'd encourage you to reach out to us if you've got any feedback, ideas for guests, or just critiques in general. We're all ears. You can email info@mbcm.ca. You can comment on our YouTube page, on our Facebook page. You'll know there are a few different outlets you can use to reach us, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for listening.
In the night I will wait for you, I will wait days. As the sun breaks the night, the sun breaks the night, you fill my eyes with wonder and awe, enraptured by your love.